The topic of the day is fat or oils.
No. Okay, so like I think we like first should like what we call fat on your body is adipose tissue. What we eat are fats. They're macronutrients. Okay, now let's continue.
Right. So we're not talking about fat on our body. We're talking about fat that we intake, right? That we ingest. And I think really specifically we should talk about oils, because I think this is something that is so like pervasive in our society that like if you just start looking at labels and start reading things, you'd be like, holy moly, this stuff is everywhere, and it's heated, it's damaged, it's like there are some people that talk about polyunsaturated oils as being one of the major reasons for the like some of the health crisis and other things that we have going on right now, because they are like fats are super important. So I think we should start there on like why ingesting fats is a good thing. And number one is like cellular health, right? We talked about this a little bit last week, but think about all your cells as a bubble.
Okay, so maybe like we realize our body is made up of about hundreds of millions of billions of cells.
What
like
it is, it's cells.
Everything in your body is
cells put together.
Cells. Okay, now we go into the next part.
We are just billions of cells and like a bunch of bacteria, but like billions of cells, right? So each cell is like a bubble, right? And that bubble is the outside of that bubble is a membrane, and things need to go in and out of that membrane. These cells are like floating around, right, in fluid. So
and they need to be permeability is a important feature of a cell,
right? Because with a cell inside, they're going to be creating like trash and garbage, right? So that needs to leave the cell to then get excreted from the body or processed, right? But then the cell also needs to eat, right? So stuff needs to go into the cell in order for it to get its food, right? So what happens is that outer membrane, right, is consisted almost entirely of fats, I believe, if it's not entirely consistent.
I am pretty entirely of fats.
Right? And so the fats that our cells turn over, I don't know what the thing is, like every 7 years or something.
It depends on which part of your body are you looking for turnover in your cells, but every 7 years you have a complete new cell body.
So the cool part about that is we can be replacing things all the time, which is awesome. So that means when you make changes and you start ingesting better fats, right, those will start to get incorporated into the cells and your body's going to become healthier. Because if our cells are healthy, the rest of our body is going to be healthy. And so the membrane of this cell is made almost entirely of fats. And the fats that we eat are what's going to populate this outer membrane. So if we're eating a bunch of crap like trans fatty acids or a bunch of like damaged polyunsaturated fats or a bunch of vegetable oils and that kind of stuff, it's going to affect that membrane, which then means that trash isn't going to get out as easily, good things aren't going to get in as easily, and the cell might become more rigid, right, and less like fluid. So that's an issue because we're not getting rid of the things we need to get, and we're not getting the things we need, right? So if we were just like stop giving you a bunch of oxygen and only feed you half as much and then never let you poop, right? That's what you're doing to your cells. It's just like starving them and poisoning them probably at the same time, right? Because we're not getting rid of the trash.
Wow, that was very deep.
It was. I'm trying to relate it to human.
I like it though.
So really what it comes down to is what types of fats are you eating is the huge piece. And there's 3 different types of fats. We have saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated. Those are the 3 main broad categories of fats, right? So give me some examples of saturated fats.
You want a list of saturated fats?
Give me some. Just rattle some off for me.
Oh my gosh. Well,
I want you to participate in this conversation.
Most fats aren't like a lot of things. Nothing is like 100% of one thing. Like if I have a steak, it's not 100% protein. There's fat in the steak as well. So Some big ones are going to be animal products, so beef, like tallow, lard, all of those kind of things. Ghee, which is derived from butter, and butter are going to be predominantly saturated fat, coconut oil, and then there's like palm oils and stuff like that if you really want to dig into saturated fats.
So saturated fat's a good way to tell if something is predominantly saturated fats. Oh, coconut oil is another one. I don't know if you said that one, but they're typically solid at room temperature. So like that's how we can tell. They have basically all of their carbon bonds are filled with hydrogen and there's no double bonds. And so that's what makes saturated fat, which makes it stable at room temperature, right? So the next one over, we consider monounsaturated fats, which a lot of people consider like our heart healthy, right? Heart healthy fats.
So these are going to be the olive oil, peanut oil, avocado oil, sesame oils, give or take. And remember, they are predominantly monosaturated for the most part, but they do have some polyunsaturated qualities.
Yeah, it's very few that you're going to have something that is just one thing, right? It's typically going to have a few of the other fats as well. But we're looking at what's the majority. Most people, like you said, olive oil is probably one of the biggest ones there. Avocado oil is probably another one of the most
olive oil is 75% monounsaturated.
Right. So olive oil is huge. Avocado oil is huge there. Those are probably the two main big ones. And then we have what's called polyunsaturated fatty acids. So poly meaning many, unsaturated fatty acids.
So these are going to be like just about everything else. So this is where you hear like grapeseed oil, sunflower oil, flaxseed, like hemp oil. Those are going to be the bigger
vegetable oils, canola oil, soybean oil.
So basically, these are the ones that I would say do not cook with ever. Like I know we're not there yet in this thing, but like these are like stop using these immediately with like 75,000 exclamation points.
And I would probably even argue that you probably should just limit this category to an extent because you're probably unknowingly getting a bunch of these in different sources. And so all right, so all right, fats are good, and we need all of them, right? We need saturated, we need monounsaturated, we need polyunsaturated. They're all important in like different processes in our body. So most people will say like a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. Like, I don't know anyone who's ever tracked their fats. Like I've never tracked my fats, but like one we forgot to talk about, fish oil. Like maybe you said it, but monounsaturated. That's probably another big omega-3 polyunsaturated fat is fish oil. So that would be the big one in that category, which I would say is we could probably do more of to an extent.
Yeah, I did not say fish oil only because I don't. We were talking about cooking oils, and I didn't really feel like fish oil. I don't cook in fish oil, so there's that.
Right. So polyunsaturated. We should probably back up and just give a little more context to polyunsaturated. Typically, we break it then into two categories: omega-3 and omega-6s. So omega-3, most people think of as anti-inflammatory, and omega-6s, most people think of as inflammatory type of things. It's not that remember, this is a balance, right? This isn't like I shouldn't ever have inflammatory foods. It means we want a nice balance. And most people consume a lot of omega-6s and very few omega-3s. So that's where fish oil comes into play, or fish come into play, is providing a lot of those omega-3 fatty acids.
Yes, but remember, a lot of even the stuff that we've already talked about is going to have a safer level of omega-3s to omega-6s, that general 1-to-1 that we're talking about. There are things that are just highly more omega-6s, and those are the things that we're the most concerned about. Is you're finding them added in everything, which is going to be like canola oil and vegetable oil. Like they're in everything, and they're predominantly omega-6s, and they don't really have an omega-3s, so they're not in that balance. So when you're consuming them, you have to eat a lot of omega-3s to find that balance.
Right. And so most experts, I would say, like the 1-to-1 to 1-to-3 ratio of omega-3s to 6s. But when we look at the standard American diet, it's like a 1-to-20, 1-to-25, I think, of the numbers I've seen, which is like not good, not good at all. But so we kind of want to transition this a little bit to the cooking oil piece of it, because I think that's really important. But I think it's good to have just a general understanding of fats and like what are they, because that starts to get you into like the cooking oil piece and like, all right, what should I use, what shouldn't I use? Because I think cooking oil is actually a really big lever for a lot of people, because it's something you use almost every day. If you're cooking eggs, you're probably cooking them in something. You're cooking veggies, you probably drizzled them with something. If you're sauteing, like you probably have oil involved. And so like oil is one of those things that's probably involved in almost every meal that you eat to an extent. And so being very deliberate and being very conscious about the oils that you're using is super, super important, because it's something you're using all the time, right? If this was something you just did like once a week or once a month, like I could care less. Like we've got bigger fish to fry. But like these everyday levers, if we make a change there, like profound effect on what else is going on in our life, because you're doing it so frequently, right? So that's why oils is such a big deal. So the first thing that we want to think about with oils is smoke point. So when does the oil degrade? And every single oil has a smoke point, meaning once you heat it past its smoke point, the oil breaks down. So the bonds break down and it starts to, create a rancid oil, right? It can make it problematic. So it could be something really healthy like olive oil, right? Like olive oil, straight out the bottle, drink it out the bottle. Cool, like do your thing, right? But once you start heating that sucker past 400, 450, 500, like it is now turning into something completely different.
But trans fats are what they used to believe that it was turning into, but that is actually incorrect. It's not turning into trans fats. It is changing the compounds of the olive oil. So 400 degrees with olive oil. That's medium heat in most.
And to be honest, I think most people stir fry or fry much higher than that. Much higher than, like if you're...
I cook everything on my stovetop on level high or level 9 or whatever it is. So I'm using a high heat cooking oil if I'm cooking on my stovetop.
Yeah. So it's not turning into trans fats, which is a good thing, right? Because we know like trans fats, we know any really amount of trans fats to an extent is not, like we want to minimize as much as possible. With trans fatty acids, you're going to have some that naturally occur in nature, but some oils will transform into trans fatty acids if they get heated repeatedly or get heated too hot, type of thing. So, but it degrades the oil either way, and so then it's no longer healthy for us; it's more unhealthy for us if we're eating degraded oils. So, olive oil, like a lot of people for a long time was like, olive oil, stir fry with olive oil, do a lot of stuff with olive oil. No.
I think we just go so in the beginning, you started talking about saturated and unsaturated fats. So let's just go back to like when you're looking at cooking at higher heat, saturated fats are going to be better. The ones that are going to be solid at room temperature are going to be better to cook at on high heat.
Typically, like if without looking at an actual table of heats, they're typically safer, right? So we're thinking butters, we're thinking lard, coconut oil to an extent. We should probably, are you bringing up since I'm on my phone, I'm going to bring up a oil smoke point table.
I can get one.
I got one coming right now.
But coconut oil is like kind of the go-to for high heat frying in like most health circles because it does have a relatively high smoke point. But I think some of it is we are cooking, and if we're cooking at a higher point than like what we like deem for these things, maybe the problem isn't the cooking temperature. Maybe it's our lack of patience. That food does take a while to cook, and like kind of like time under tension in workouts right now, your food needs time under tension to get the best results. So like cook on a lower temperature for a longer period of time is usually better in most cases for like how you're drying your food out, quality, and all that kind of stuff too. So Are we cooking our food at too high of a temperature?
Looking at this, coconut oil is 450 for a smoke point. So pretty high, but not crazy high, right? So cooking in the oven probably works pretty well because you can control temperature a little bit more. Stovetop, I don't know, not quite so much. And this is, so unrefined, if you were to buy virgin unrefined coconut oil, which is what a lot of people do, that actually lowers the smoke point to 350. So that's one thing about processing oils. That typically raises their smoke point up if an oil is processed. So just something to think about. Olive oil has a pretty big range in it, depending on where it comes from, how processed it is, all of that kind of stuff. But that's typically around that 400 mark as well.
So really the higher saturated fat percentage is going to determine what cooking heat would be best for what you're using.
Many times. Yeah. But then we run into like your kind of outliers to an extent where we run into like avocado oil, right? So this avocado oil
has the same smoke point as olive oil.
It does not. It does not, Ashley.
Yes, it does.
I'm looking at a table right here. I'm looking at a table. And avocado oil has a smoke point of 520 degrees. Olive oil, refined olive oil, is at a high end 470. It says 390 to 470.
So, what is the difference between how we extract olive oil and how we extract avocado oil?
I have no idea.
They should be extracted the same exact way because we're talking about similar byproducts of what it comes from. Cooking rules should naturally go with the two. I mean, you're also talking about avocado oil didn't come to the market until 1999 as a food product. So it's just a lot of the research that I read on avocado oil is using it as intended was the same way as you use olive oil. That it's pressed from it. It should be cold pressed, and the cooking rules that apply to olive oil are similar to avocado oil.
So explain to me then what's the argument?
That the smoke point is the same on avocado oil as it is to olive oil. Based on a lot of the research that I've read, that is like where they're at on it.
So then would you saute at a high heat with olive oil and with avocado oil the same?
I don't saute with either of them.
So what would you saute with?
I'm a lard or a beef tallow user, personally.
So beef tallow is 480. Let's see if lard is on here. Lard is 374.
Ooh, I probably should work on that.
So for this respect, beef tallow is a higher one. Interesting. Coconut oil, unrefined, 350. Canola oil, aka rapeseed, 400.
But don't use that. Don't use rapeseed ever.
No, don't use rapeseed because of its high polyunsaturated fatty acid content. Safflower oil is also up here at 510. So when we think about, I'd be curious to see the stuff on the avocado oil because I honestly, I haven't seen that anywhere. Like every smoke point I've ever read, avocado oil is always the highest.
Yeah, it was in this. It was in a comparison to avocado oil to olive oil and why it is one way versus the other. So I'll find them and send them to you.
I'd be curious. What do you mean one way versus the other?
One versus the other, as in they're very similar in how they're extracted, and that's why their uses are similar and their smoke point is similar because we're talking about like something that we grow and all of like their characteristics are very similar. Mm-hmm. That's why, and I think that might be some of it. So,
well, I mean, they're both fruits. They both grow on trees. So I mean, really, what this comes down to is like be very conscious about the oils that you use, and be very conscious of smoke points, and like then find your go-to oils. Like, what do you saute with, right? So Ashley uses beef tallow. We use avocado oil. Like, find the oil that you want to saute with, and that's like your high heat saute oil. Like, that's what you use. Like, and like if you need to, find someone that has one of those little heat guns, right? So you can like check, just like start up your pan, right? Go to whatever you'd cook at, get your little heat gun, zap it, and see what you actually are cooking at. Are you cooking
I
at like
want to buy one of these right now. Like, add to cart right now on Amazon.
just like, it's an infrared heat sensor. Someone would probably have it. Ask your local plumber. They probably have one because they would use it to check different things. But yeah, and I think they're on Amazon too. But super interesting, right? Because most of us just like turn that sucker on and we just let it rip, and maybe we're cooking at like 500 degrees, which is like could be the case. Like if you let your pan heat up big time. So it's interesting. So what else do you have with that? Anything?
No, but lard is from pigs. Tallow is from cow. Lamb, I think. Also sheep. I think they're sheep tallow too.
And you can find those. I mean, you can find those really anywhere. Amazon is going to have it.
Epic has a good quality one, same as the bars that we carry at the gym. But sourcing is important for those. Okay, so something that I think is probably the most important takeaway from all of this is that there are oils that I would 100% tell you to just not use in your house and to stop buying them. And I'm not saying like you should never eat them, but because they come in so many other products, I would just like, so vegetable oil, canola oil, and like vegetable shortenings and stuff, I would stop buying them and bringing them into your house. And Trevor's giving me that look like, oh, she's going hard on this. And the reason is that we're dealing with things that usually have a high level of pesticides, and they're heated and extracted using chemicals. So they're all the byproducts are already toxic when they go into the jars. So you're putting toxic products into you. And like, it's very, very hard to avoid them unless you're eating absolutely no processed foods. But I highly recommend not cooking or using them in your house. There are so many great subs for shortening and for oils and that kind of stuff that like I don't think it's worth using them in the house.
100%. Like I couldn't agree more. And the other thing is, look at food labels. The most common oils you're going to see on most salad dressings, packaged goods, all that kind of stuff: soybean oil, cottonseed oil, canola oil. Those are really the main ones. Am I missing any?
Corn oil.
Corn oil, like vegetable oil, kind of gets thrown in there, which is a weird term because it's not actually really from vegetables. But like, so those are typically cheap, really cheap oils, right? Which is why they go into products, so you can keep the cost of the product down, which makes sense from like I'm trying to sell the cheapest product type of thing. But the people that are formulating those products aren't designing it for health. They're designing it for cost effectiveness. And so they're going to use the cheapest thing available. The best is when you say like, and, or like canola and, or cottonseed, or soybean and, or canola oil. So it's like basically they're using the cheapest oil at time of manufacture to go in there. So they don't care. They're not concerned about the health potential consequences of it. They're concerned about the price of the product, right? And so that's why it's really important to turn labels over and start looking at stuff. Because if you look at boxed goods, packaged goods, you're going to see those oils everywhere, like absolutely everywhere, in almost any packaged, any boxed, any salad dressing, anything like that. They're going to be in there. And so if we're eating a lot of that stuff, we're just naturally consuming a lot of those oils, which are just not doing good things for our body, right? Which means they're starting to replace our cellular membrane with these nasty oils or with these nasty fats, and that's just creating some havoc over time. It doesn't just happen instantly, right? It's just something that happens over time.
And this is why I like, just to dig in more, this is why like a low fat or a no fat diet can also be problematic, is that we are removing all the fats from our diet. And as we've said, all of our cells are made from fat. So how is your body responding when you're not eating enough fat to replace your cell membranes and create hormones, which are all fat products of the fat that we eat? So just knowing like the fat that we eat is making up our entire body, and it also is what is causing, like, it can cause a lot of hormone issues. And that's why for me, I see a lot of women that were low fat diets having issues in their 40s and 50s because they were low fat for so long that their hormones are in the tank.
Right.
In the nice way.
And low fat is no fun. Like, fat gives things
That makes
flavor.
everything taste better.
Right. And so the other really interesting thing about fat, so we talked about fat's importance in hormones, cellular membrane. Another thing is like all of your nerves, every nerve in your body has this myelin sheath on it, which makes the transmission of signals faster, and it's entirely fat. And so interesting, especially for like brain development, right? Our brains are a bunch of nerves, especially for young kids, like getting young kids to eat good fats, and especially getting them to do things like fish oil, or eating fish on a regular basis, or seafood on a regular basis, or if you have to, like cod liver oil or something like that, to get them these omega-3 fatty acids, because they're super, super, super important in brain development, the DHA in this. So that's just another thing. If you do have young kids, trying to make sure that they're either getting seafood on a regular basis, or they're probably supplementing with some sort of fish oil or fatty acid type thing. So we're getting that EPA and DHA components, super important in brain development. So
gosh, I feel like there's so much more that we could say about this.
I mean, you can talk about fats forever. It's just super important, right? So at the end of the day, think about, get rid of the crappy fats. So get rid of your canola oil, get rid of your vegetable oils, get rid of your polyunsaturated omega-6 fatty acid oils, just all of that junk. Okay, just get rid of it. You'll get it other places, like you'll get it in just random places. So focus on making sure we're getting some good saturated fats in, get some good monounsaturated fats. So we're doing the olive oil thing, we're doing the avocado thing, we're drizzling on salads, we're drizzling it on veggies, we're drizzling it around, and then getting some good omega-3s, fish oil, some flaxseed, potentially, if you can convert it. But I like marine life better. And so if we're getting a variety, we're good, we're solid. Like, we don't necessarily need to worry about things, but just think about a variety. Pay attention to what you're eating, read labels, read what's in it. Can you find a salad dressing that has olive oil in it rather than soybean oil? Probably. You just got to look a little bit. It's probably gonna be a little more expensive, but that's just the way it goes. So if you're doing those things, you're doing what you need to be successful. We don't need to create a mental disorder thinking about the fats that we're eating. Just think about getting a variety, and you're usually pretty good. Anything to add?
Fats don't make you fat.
And they don't make you fat. They just contain calories.
So just the food for thought. Like, I think sometimes we relate eating fat to being fat, and that is 100% not the case, unless you're just overeating.
I mean, you can eat too much fat and gain weight, but you can also eat too many carbs and gain weight. You can also, I don't know about protein. Like, I don't know if you can eat too much protein and still gain weight. So
more studies coming soon on that.